Welcome back to the Game Collection. I am SuperDerek, and this is Fallout New Vegas. Black Isle Studios was a subsidiary of Interplay Entertainment, famous for their work on several computer RPGs of the late 90s and early 2000s. Most notably, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 and Fallout 1 and 2. In December of 2003, facing dire financial strain, Interplay made the decision to lay off the entire Black Isle Studios team, who were currently in the process of developing a game codenamed Van Buren, or what would have eventually become known as Fallout 3. Leading up to the closure of Black Isle Studios, Interplay's serious financial situation resulted in the loss of the studio's license to produce Dungeons & Dragons titles, resulting in the cancellation of Baldur's Gate 3, The Black Hound, and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 3. Fergus Urquhart of Black Isle Studios became convinced that staying at Black Isle Studios was no longer a viable option and left the team, taking with him Chris Avallone, Chris Parker, Darren Monahan, and Chris Jones, and together they founded a new studio. In 2004, after closing Black Isle Studios, Interplay licensed the rights to the Fallout series to Bethesda Softworks. Bethesda began developing their own version of Fallout 3, which I've already talked about in another video. Long story short, Bethesda changed the nature of the Fallout series from a 2D isometric RPG to a first-person RPG with shooter elements. The game reused Bethesda's now infamous Gamebryo engine and ultimately sold well on consoles upon its release in 2008. Bethesda wanted to make another game to capitalize on this success. However, by this point, the team at Bethesda had already shifted focus to the next Elder Scrolls game, so Bethesda reached out to a team who already had a feel for the Fallout universe, an offer which Fergus Urquhart and the rest of Obsidian Entertainment were happy to accept. After all, the team had unfinished business in the wasteland. A common theme among all the stories told throughout Fallout New Vegas is the role that the Mojave Wasteland plays. The game doesn't simply take place in an irradiated desert. Each tale presented is shaped by it, and feel like they couldn't exist in any other game. The game is just saturated with the lore that precedes this title. Layers upon layers of lore. The pre-apocalyptic world explores the question of what would have happened if nuclear fusion technology was widespread long before the transistor. The ruthless optimism, paranoia, and patriotism in this world couldn't keep the bombs from falling, resulting in a poisonous land with few remaining resources over which survivors fought. Clinging on to the technologies and broken cities of the past, the survivors hobbled together settlements and defend the few resources they can scavenge from raiding tribes. The settlements become organized and fortified, but so do the tribes. In this world, pre-apocalyptic life was forgotten generations ago. It is in this world that our stage is set. You, a courier, are just coming to, finding your hands are bound, your graves been dug, and your captors, soon to be murderers, offer their condolences because...
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Of course, it's not really the end. Left for dead in a shallow grave, the courier was spared the fate too common to too many in the post-apocalyptic Mojave. Rescued and delivered to a doctor, the courier is able to make a complete recovery, leaving you with one face within memory. It's up to you to track down that man in the checkered jacket, because after all, you two had unfinished business in the wasteland. Much like Fallout 3 before it, the story of Fallout New Vegas is pretty freeform and hinges upon the choices that you make. Do you follow the smarmy door-to-door salesman across the desert? Or do you live and let live, living out the rest of your days in peace? Who am I kidding? Of course you're going to fill that dirty rat full of holes. The only real question is how merciful are you going to be to the others on your warpath, and which tribal factions will you tear asunder? What really sets Fallout New Vegas apart from Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 for me is the tone delivered throughout the game. New Vegas establishes right off the bat that this world is harsh and unforgiving, but does so with a grim sense of humor and playfulness that Bethesda hasn't quite been able to replicate. New Vegas doesn't just invite you into the world, it pulls you in with a gravitational force using its subtle charms and southwestern hospitality. Never before did spending hundreds of hours in an irradiated desert listening to 50s country songs sound so appealing. So pull up a bar stool at the nearest saloon, crack open a sunset sarsaparilla, and breathe in the dusty, tingly gamma radiation, because this is the sort of game better savored. Along the road, though, you're going to meet several memorable inhabitants of the Mojave Wasteland, and their personalities and stories told throughout the game are going to be what keep you coming back for more. The story of Boone, the sniper, in particular drew me in. At first, he just seemed like a useful companion to have around, and he most definitely was that. But as you talk to him and adventure around the wastes, he gradually opens up and will tell you more about his past and what drives his hatred for the Legion, and a difficult choice that haunts his memory to this day. But you can't just pester him into revealing his secrets. You have to build up trust, come to rely upon him over time. He won't just spill his guts because you walked into an event tile. You never know when things are going to happen, what will trigger a new discussion. It just feels natural. And that's only one of the several companions you can meet along the path to your eventual showdown at the end of the game. The main questline, while interesting, feels more like an excuse or a means of conveying you from one colorful personality to the next. But should you choose to forego the main questline, you'll still stumble into plenty of places to go and find plenty of people in need of either killing or saving. Such is life in the Mojave. I suppose that the only criticism I have for the stories told throughout the game is the relative lack of gray area options built into the dialogue. Some of the choices are a little too obvious. That is, until you hit some of the DLC later on. Because I played the Ultimate Edition of New Vegas on PC, I had access to all of the DLC from the start, though most of it is recommended for mid to late game consumption. When it came to New Vegas, I was no mysterious stranger. However, I was yet to make my way through any of the DLC, and each iteration was a pleasant surprise full of newly crafted environments, well-written characters, and challenging scenarios. Old World Blues in particular was my favorite expansion, which was chocked full of ridiculous dialogue options, tongue-in-cheek anti-communist McCarthyism, and over-the-top voice acting, making it feel like I was in a living, breathing, terrible sci-fi B-movie, and I couldn't wipe the stupid grin off my face even if I had wanted to. The Mojave is an open world to explore in whatever order you see fit. Once you, the courier, has been patched up, the Mojave Wasteland opens itself up to you to explore as you see fit. This open world feels far more open and expansive in comparison to Fallout 3's sometimes claustrophobic Capital Wasteland. It's open in so much that you have only the hostility of an unforgiving environment to act as your guide. The world is also laid out in such a way that it takes much longer to get from point A to point B because of the death claws that block off a long section of highway and some invisible walls that will keep you from scaling what appear to be scalable landscape features. The Mojave also feels like a harsher environment to survive in than the Capital Wasteland, especially if you have hardcore mode enabled, which I did for the purpose of this review. Scavenging for water to stay hydrated, food to stave off hunger, increased weight for all items in the game, all reflect a harsher depiction of life after nukes. I highly recommend it, at least at first, to get a better feel for the atmosphere and the feeling of surviving in the Mojave. It's not all sunshine and Geiger counters, though, when it comes to Fallout New Vegas' world design. Perhaps the biggest problem within the game is the titular settlement of New Vegas. the Strip, which falls short of depicting the grandiose neon lights that Las Vegas is so famous for. This, along with pretty much every other shortcoming within New Vegas for that matter, is easily remedied if you too are playing on PC, thanks to the amazing modding community that supports this game. However, I didn't use mods for this review, except for stability mods, in order to give myself the baseline experience. And in case you haven't already noticed, the baseline experience has been very, very good. Fallout New Vegas is an action RPG with heavy first-person shooter elements. There are some subtle differences though that might not at first be evident while watching gameplay. Accuracy within the game, while at least partially determined by player skill, is also heavily dependent upon weapon condition and the points you put into your special stats during character creation. Furthermore, damage output is also heavily determined by the skill points dispensed during level ups. So being able to score a 360 no-scope headshot will not be enough to really get by in this game. And while being great at first-person shooters is no guarantee that you'll be good at New Vegas, it should also be stated that being bad at first-person shooters will not keep you from being good at Fallout New Vegas either. And yes, I am speaking from experience. VATS makes a return from Fallout 3, granting the player all of the time in the world to choose a target, pick a limb to aim for, and the game will automatically aim and fire for you, provided that you save up enough points to spend on that ability. Failing that, you can also snipe your opponents from afar, or sneak up on your enemies and plant grenades on them. Get creative with it. And this is one of the greater strengths of Fallout New Vegas, is that most quests available to you can either be declined or completed, and most of those can be completed multiple ways. Usually it follows the formula of find somebody that needs killing and do the deed, but sometimes you might be better off talking to that person to get their side of the story, or maybe talk to a different person entirely who gives you a different quest, and maybe you end up needing to protect that guy instead of killing him. While exploring a vault that I just happened to stumble across, I made my way down through some flooded bits of a nuclear reactor, and it was a computer. Naturally, I hacked the computer to see what was up and found a message from some people who were actually trapped inside the reactor and were slowly dying. I could free them by opening the vents from the reactor, but it would cause immense damage to the settlement's farmlands. And I had to make the decision then and there. Do I save these people trapped in the reactor and destroy farmlands? Or do I sacrifice the people for the greater good? Or do I wait for those people to perish and then destroy the farmlands anyway? I honestly don't know if that latter option's really an option, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if it is. And that's just the kind of game Fallout New Vegas is. Another aspect of the game that's easily overlooked but is honestly one of the game's defining characteristics are the branching paths of dialogue with NPCs. Many options are tucked behind skill points requirements, such as knowing enough about explosives to disarm an explosive, or only just enough about them to be able to set them off. Some dialogue options are hidden behind perks that you can unlock, such as Lady Killer or Confirmed Bachelor, which unlocks the courier's power of seduction. And before I forget to mention this, Fallout New Vegas definitely has an emphasis on guns, lasers, and explosives, but there's also a plethora of melee weapons at your disposal as well. Meaning, if you so choose, you could essentially play this game like it's Oblivion and sledgehammer your way through waves of fiends with guns. That is, however, an option I have yet to actually explore in depth. Fallout New Vegas isn't really all that much to look at by today's standards. The game is a decade old after all, but it does look quite a bit nicer than Fallout 3 in my opinion, and a whole lot less depressing overall. The blood and gore is really over the top, especially for critical hits when people's limbs literally explode. Again though, if you're playing on a PC made in the past 5 years, you're likely going to be able to install mods that will drastically improve any shortcomings in the aesthetics that you may perceive. Musically, this game is fantastic, not only for its amazing original score, which sets the tone of the lonely desert perfectly, but also the selection of copyrighted music that I'm unable to play for you today. I'm no fan of country music, but the tracks selected from the 1940s or 50s exposed me to a genre of country music that I just had never listened to before. And I feel like if country music sounded more like this today, well, maybe it would be in my normal rotation after all. Because the game was built upon the engine Bethesda refuses to let die, Fallout New Vegas is, of course, riddled with bugs. What Bethesda game isn't? But luckily, modders have come to the rescue once again, who have hobbled together a series of comprehensive patches that severely reduces the amount of hard crashes you would normally encounter whilst playing the game. However, if you're playing on PS3 or Xbox 360, there are still plenty of unpatched bugs that you will want to take a look at before making a buying decision. Fallout New Vegas is a fantastic experience, and is, in my opinion, the best modern Fallout title, hands down. Obsidian Entertainment has proved to be the masters of the universe that they themselves crafted. It was nice that Bethesda allowed Obsidian to return to work on the Fallout series and wrap up their unfinished business in the Wasteland. And I honestly can't be more excited to play their upcoming title, The Outer Worlds, which appears to be Obsidian's attempt to create a new world in which to tell their stories. But until I'm able to get my hands on a copy of that game, I don't think there's a better way to kill a couple hundred hours than Fallout New Vegas, and that's why it's earned itself a spot in the game collection.